and welcome to the special interview conducted by the Magazine Committee of Department of Political Science, Shahid Bhagat Singh College, University of Delhi. Today, we are honored to welcome Dr. Harsh Vipant sir. He is Vice President, Studies and Foreign Policy at ORF, where his research shapes to help policy debates on Asia, great power politics, and global security. He is also professor at international relations with King's India Institute at King's College London and serves as the director of the Delhi School of Transnational Affairs at Delhi University. So, sir, our topic today is decoding American foreign policy, examining eagle elephant dynamics in the 21st century. So, sir, should we begin with the question now?
Please do.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining, sir. Yeah, I would like to begin with a question. So, sir, in much of your recent writing, you suggest that the world order isn't collapsing, but becoming more uncertain and fragmented. So, sir, how would you describe the kind of international system we are living in today?
See, I think certainly there is a flux in the international system. International order, it never collapses in the sense that it is not going to just disappear when we wake up. What happens is gradually it transforms itself from one set of actors and one set of assumptions to another set of actors and assumptions. And I think we are in the phase where we were looking at the world through a certain lens, and I think today we require a different set of lens to understand what is going on. I don't know if anyone has the right idea in terms of what exactly is happening, but it's clear that a number of assumptions that on which we grew up are no longer valid. So when I was sort of growing up, it was 1990s, end of Cold War, American unipolarity. It was the high tide of economic globalization, institutionalism, and the faith in institutions was at an all-time high. WTO, UN Security Council could coordinate its actions among major powers, and of course, you had European Union sitting out as an exemplar of what institutions should be. I think today, if you look around, you find that everything is, nothing of that works. Institutions are no longer working. Of course, EU is facing a crisis. EU, which was supposed to be a supranational organization of its kind, where sovereignty countries were willing to pool their sovereignty, that is not working. Globalization is being challenged left, right, and center. The same countries who at one point in time told us that look, economic globalization is going to be the mecca that every country should go to, today are saying we are withdrawing from that. We want to be more isolationist. We want to be more protectionist. When it comes to trade, we use tariffs as an instruments of weaponization. So it's a complete change, turnaround in those assumptions. And of course, we don't know what American unipolarity has given way to. We don't know whether it's going to be a bipolar world or a multipolar world. We keep on seeing glimpses of different orders emerging, but I don't think we know which order is going to dominate. So I think it's fair to say that we live in a volatile world where the world order is not settled. And I think this is transition from one order to another is often the most difficult one, because it leads to conflicts, it leads to violence, it leads to wars. And I think that is something we are witnessing today. When you look around the world, how many conflicts are there, how many conflicts are raging. Major powers are involved in conflicts. Countries are not shying away from using force. The use of force is back in a way that few thought it would. So I think this is again that's why I think that we are living in a period where there is an interregnum. We don't know where we would go, but we certainly know that the old order is no longer functioning the way it was a few years back, till a few years back.
Rightly said, sir. So talking about US again, so there is a dominating narrative right now, which is happening or which is growing across the world, that there is a sharp American decline. But in your writings, you have pushed back against that idea. So what aspect of US power do you think that are most underestimated right now?
See, I think American can say that, compared to what America was in 1990s, of course, there has been a relative decline because other powers have risen, right? China has risen, India has risen. The share of GDP that America used to have in 1990s of the world GDP, it is no longer there. Chinese are catching up in technologies. Countries are defying the US in some ways in certain geographies. But the reality is also that no one is there to replace the US at this point. I mean, if you see what America could do in Venezuela, and not a shriek from Russians and the Chinese, who were supposed to be the most important allies of Venezuela, right? So the dominance that US has in certain geographies, in certain sectors, remains unmatched, and its ability to command attention. I mean, after all, when we say today that, look, everything is in flux, so much is changing, a lot of it you attribute to the US. Trump is challenging you in ways that we have not seen any other leader do, and every other country is trying to recalibrate according to what Americans are doing. So, if you think about and Trump and how he's shaping Russian foreign policy, if you look at how he's shaping Chinese foreign policy, Indian foreign policy, European foreign policy, I think that dominance of the US as, uh, in some ways, the central pivot around which a lot of the global debates revolve has not gone anywhere. I think the pushback that is happening, many countries are pushing back against the US, and particularly the way Mr. Trump has functioned, is also a tribute to how other actors have risen relative to the US. And I think that, so we are today, when we sit here, we can talk about EU India FTA, right? In India and European
Yeah.
Union have signed that FTA, free trade agreement. Now, this free trade agreement had been in negotiations for close to 2 decades. We were not willing to sign it, both the Europeans as well as us. So something happened that pushed us towards the end goal, and that something was Mr. Trump. That he accelerated the process of India and the EU recognizing that there is no alternative but to come to terms with each other and sign this agreement, solidify the economic partnership, because Mr. Trump is challenging the fundamentals of our economic policy. So, in that sense, I think America still remains very, very central to the way the world works. Whether we like it, whether we don't like it, the fact is that every country has to calibrate its foreign policy based on what America does or doesn't do. Now, when America is saying we want, I mean, in its national security strategy and its national defense strategy in particular, recently released, it says that that while it wants to be there in the Indo-Pacific, it wants its allies to do more. Now,
Mhm.
this is once again going to be a challenge because the allies of the US, who have forever relied on American benevolence, are now having to recalibrate. Europeans are being pushed to spend more on defense. Similarly, America's partners in the Indo Pacific will also look at this and say that, look, we need to start doing something about it. So I think that ability of America to push the certain buttons in international politics and force other countries to recalibrate, it still remains unmatched. I don't think there is any other country that comes close to it.
It was even mentioning about EU India trade. I was reading your article yesterday, and it was very enriching to read and to know that perspective because a whole country is celebrating right now. I was going through LinkedIn, people are celebrating. So that's something that Trump has affected in a lot of the manner. So moving on to the next question we have, that in your work on great power politics, China often appears as a central reference point for US strategy. So has US China rivalry becoming the main axis shaping today's world order?
I think so. I think in some ways it is the central fault line in global politics today, and it sort of started happening under Trump 1.0, when Trump single-handedly changed the conversation on China in the West. He sort of made China the most important national security challenge, and he also pushed West to think through the implications of making China so economically powerful. So, so I think gradually this argument was then taken over by Biden. Biden was much more restrictive towards China, and in his third term, Trump seems, as of now, a bit confused because he has not given clear indications as to where he wants to go. Certainly, both his national security and national defense strategies. They talk about China and how China is a challenger, but they are not as vociferous against China as they were in his first term. And of course, he wants to visit China April or May this year. So whether he comes to an agreement with China, there is a lot of speculation around the G2, where the argument is that Americans will say we will take care of Western Hemisphere, and China takes care of the Pacific, and that's how the distribution would last. So spheres of influence kind of setup. But I think in some ways that is unlikely to happen, partly because in the American body politic, there is a lot of resistance now to seeing China as a peer competitor. So they do want to challenge China in fundamental ways, whether it's technology, whether it is trade, whether it is defense. And in the Indo-Pacific, in China's neighborhood, China has a lot of countries which will push back against this idea that China can be given central role. It is not for America to give that role. It is for countries in the region to decide how they want to live with China. And I think there is a lot of pushback against China as the dominant player in the Indo-Pacific. I don't think many countries in the region would want to see that. So I think there's going to be a combination of competition and cooperation that you will see in various countries, how they define their ties with China. But I don't think that US and China, fundamentally, if you're thinking it from a structural perspective, theoretically, it's very difficult for a rising power, for an established power to come to terms with a rising power like China. So US and China, there is going to be a contestation. There is going to be a contestation for influence, contestation for markets, contestation for technology, and I think that is already visible. I don't think that's going anywhere. I think US-China competition, regardless of Mr. Trump's personal predilections, will going to be the most important fault line in global politics, and other countries will have to work around it.
Rightly said, sir. Truly agreed on it. So, talking about Indo-Pacific, you mentioned that it's not just a map; it's an attempt to shape regional order. So, sir, from your perspective, how real and durable is this Indo-Pacific framework?
See, I think it's not going anywhere. It is durable. It's not a
Mhm.
framework. It's a reality. It's like for a long time we lived with this idea that Indian Ocean is a separate part of the maritime geography away from Pacific. And I think when Japanese Prime Minister started talking about, in 2007 when he gave that famous speech, Conference of the Two Seas, to Indian Parliament, his argument was very simple. He was talking about some organic links between Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean, India's role in East and Southeast Asia, and how Southeast and East Asia should look at India as an important player in the wider Pacific region. And in sync with that, I think the changes have been very visible. China's rise, Chinese presence in the Indian Ocean is a reality. India can't do anything about it. We may bemoan the fact, but they will be there. They are, increasingly China sees itself as a global power. It will not be constrained by this idea, though, no, I'm only a Pacific power. I'm not going to go into the Indian Ocean. It will come to the Indian Ocean. Similarly, India will rise, and India is already rising and doing a lot of things in the Pacific. We have even gone to Pacific Islands. We have the Forum of India and Pacific Island States, FIPIC. So in a sense, our ambitions are growing like China's, and that is already shaping this maritime geography. So it's not a theoretical concept anymore. It is a reality in which we are all in some ways thriving and surviving, and we want to preserve a stable balance of power in the region so that Indo-Pacific remains free from the dominance of one single country. And in that sense, India is welcoming the role that EU wants to play. India welcomes the role that America wants to play in the Indo-Pacific, because that gives India greater room to maneuver. So I think in that sense, we are going to see a continued investment in this idea. And howsoever much Chinese may not like this idea, it is not going anywhere.
Right. So next thing in Indo-Pacific is a Quad, like initiatives. So how effective has the Indo-Pacific approach been in translating strategic ideas into real outcomes on the ground, like a quad.
See, Quad is a very good example that we very few people thought, even many in India, when it was initiated in 2007, thought that it would continue to work. And so it has survived, it has thrived. There is a lot of activity that is happening at the Quad level, in various domains. Now, I think it is important to think through the history of Quad. Right, in 2007, again, former
Mhm.
Japanese Prime Minister Abe talks about it. He initiates this process. At that point in time, it were the Indians and the Australians who pulled back from this idea. Their argument was that uh, it may needlessly annoy the Chinese, and given our economic stakes in China, in a building a relationship with China, we should not unnecessarily give China any opportunity to begrudge us. And therefore, the idea died. Now, what happens from 2007 to 2017 when this idea is revived under Trump 1.0? What happens is that Chinese double down on targeting Indians and Australians. So both India is targeted along the border, India is targeted in other ways, Australians are targeted, there is economic coercion of Australia. So by 2017, Indians and Australians are saying, well, why did we not go in for Quad in 2007? Because what we should be doing, I mean, in some ways, it becomes a natural idea that, look, like-minded countries in the region will have to work together to ensure that there is a stable balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. Because if you don't work together, then the Chinese dominance is assured. So while always saying that, look, Quad is not against any one country, the driver in it was always a sense that if we don't work together, then we are going to face turbulence in this balance of power. So it started from there, and then during COVID, it took on a different turn. It started investing on various domains like health, and then after that, technology, military exercises. Although there is a big debate on whether Quad should be militarized, but the four countries in their own ways have been engaging with each other at multiple levels, at the bilateral level, trilateral level. So in a sense, Quad is also a structural response to the instability in the Indo-Pacific, because Indo-Pacific has no institutional mechanisms to manage turbulence. And Quad, in that sense, becomes an institutional response to this idea of the Indo-Pacific. That, look, if the Indo-Pacific is to work, then like-minded countries like Australia, Japan, US, and India will have to work together on certain critical issues, and that is what Quad represents. Unfortunately, under Trump 2.0, we have not had the leaders summit last year. Hopefully, we will have it this year, once the trade deal is signed between India and the US. So I think it is also now a matter of how India and the US get their act together, because that is going to be an important component of how where Quad would go.
Yes. If we use one term for India's foreign policy, in the past it has been referred to non-alignment, and in contemporary time it has been referred to strategic autonomy. Strategic autonomy has always been central to India's foreign policy, and so you have written extensively about it. How has India reinterpreted strategic autonomy as its engagement with the US has happened?
See, non-alignment, Piyush, was largely a response to the environment that India found itself post-independence, where rightly so the leaders of that time felt that we need to concentrate on building our domestic capabilities. We need to invest in, economic development, social stability, economic development, and of course, building partnerships with countries that will help us, move forward. Now, in that, there was this sense that, look, we want to be away from bloc politics, because the world was divided into two power blocks, Cold War, and India wanted to be away from that. So what was interesting was that India defined non-alignment more in terms of a diffidence towards partnerships. We don't want to have strategic partnerships, particularly with the West, because it was, as a post-colonial country, many in India at that point in time thought that this is something that would be unacceptable to our people. That why are we going in for partnerships with the West? Now, which meant that non-alignment at critical points also constrained our options. So, there are two critical times which India faced: 1962 war and 1971 war, right? On both, during both episodes, India, despite its non alignment, India had to ultimately seek help from major powers. In 62, India sought help from the US. In 71, India first signed a treaty of peace and friendship with Soviet Union, and then moved forward with the war effort. So it also showed us the limits of non-alignment. But it was in some ways a response to what India faced. I think what has happened in recent years is that we have reinterpreted it more positively, that this non that multi-alignment is a way for greater strategic autonomy, that the more partnerships we have, the better it is for, and we would be better, we would be able to better manage our strategic autonomy. So, for often India gives this example that, look, we are part of BRICS, we are part of Quad, we are part of SCO. In some ways, in some cases, we have Chinese and Russians. In some cases, Quad, we have America as our partner. I think that confidence has come to India because India is also today a major economic power, and that allows certain partnerships for others also to develop. So Russians want to partner with you, Chinese want to partner with you, America and you want to partner with you, because there is economic potential here, because India is the fastest growing major economy. No one really wants to turn away from India, and that India has capitalized on very well, and India has built these partnerships. Now, of course, when the times are, when there is a lack of turbulence, it is easy to manage these policy. When there is turbulence, like Mr. Trump is forcing India to make certain choices. He's putting tariffs because of our relationship with Russia. He's putting tariffs because of our relationship with Iran, and then it becomes a problem. That how do you then take a call, and what do you value? And I think that tension, that challenge for Indian foreign policy will continue till Mr. Trump is in office, and till American foreign policy continues to make these demands on India. But I think by and large, if you take the example of Ukraine, despite at that point in time many people thinking that Ukraine would lead to a collapse of Indian foreign policy, India continued to invest both in its partnership with Russia as well as in its partnership with the EU. So I think by and large India has managed multi-alignment well. But whether India can continue to preserve its strategic autonomy in a world where major power competition is growing, and where this fault line is really is sharpening by the day, that I think will be a challenge for Indian diplomacy.
True, sir. So, as you have mentioned about Russia, Ukraine, and West Asia, when India does talk about them, West often feels uncomfortable regarding it. So, sir, do you think the US now better understand this approach, and how does that understanding shape cooperation in sensitive areas like technology, where dependence is a real concern?
See, US certainly understands it much better. I think US sections of US strategic establishment understand India's foreign policy much better today than they did a few years back. Particularly, I think on Russia they understand it much better. But I don't think Trump understands it, and I think that's the problem. There is a difference between Trump and American foreign policy establishment. I think Mr. Trump and some of his core advisors look at transactionalism being the fundamental and the most important aspect of their foreign policy. Look, other presidents have also been transactional, but at times they have privileged long-term strategic engagement to short-term transactionalism. Mr. Trump seems to privilege transactionalism all the time, and I think that creates a problem. So I don't think Mr. Trump understands it, and I think Mr. Trump feels that whatever levers he has, he will use it against India, for that matter, any other country. So I think till he's there in office, it is going to be very difficult for India to make the strategic argument for Indo-US relationship. Something that India had made till now. Till now, what used to happen was that you have the Russia question, you would have the Iran question, and all the differences that India and the US would have. India would make an argument, or many in America would make an argument, that a strong relationship with India is far too important for the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific to be sacrificed at the altar of Russia or Iran or any other country. And therefore, successive American presidents, since you can go all the way back to George W. Bush, they continued to invest in India. This idea that we want to help India become a major power, we want to invest in the long term relationship with India. That was the mantra, because India's argument was that this is an important relationship, and for structural reasons. And America, and many in America also made that argument. I think that argument, that structural argument, is difficult to make with Mr. Trump, because his approach is very short term in nature. He's looking at short term victories, and therefore his personal likes and dislikes, his personal anxieties, his personal insecurities often come in the way of shaping foreign policy. So, I mean, one thing that is often talked about is that just because India did not give him credit for Operation Sindhur's, the cessation of hostilities after Operation Sindhur, something he wants, that's why he's not signing the trade deal. Now, we don't know what the reason is, but I think uh, there is evidence to suggest that he takes personal flattery very seriously, and India and no Indian prime minister would do, which certain other actors have done for him, like Pakistan, for example, what Pakistanis have done. So I think that challenge for India will continue. And in the process, what he has done, he has dismantled that post Cold War consensus to a certain extent that was beginning to develop in India. That that relationship with the US is for good. Now you have a lot of people who are Cold Warriors back in business. Now they keep telling us, "Can you trust America? Look, we told you so. Don't put your eggs in America's basket," etc. So I think uh, it is going to be very difficult now to for any Indian leader to make the kind of commitment to Indo-US relationship that Prime Minister Modi had made in the first two terms. And that is a real shame, because India-US relationship is an important relationship. And for various reasons, it requires nurturing. But Mr. Trump's approach has done a lot of damage to it, unfortunately.
Yes, sir. So, this is a final question we are having is that looking ahead, how do you see India's place in evolving world order? More as a reformer within the existing system, a breach between different power blocks, or as an independent pole in its own right?
See, I think we like to believe that we are a pole in our own right. Even when we had no material capability during the Cold War, we used to say, no, no, we are. We liked challenging the global order in some ways. For example, on nuclear issues. But I think today India is it's in a different position, because it is, in material terms, it is rising, right? Even if Indian government does not do anything for the next few years, our economy will continue to grow. I mean, it's an exaggeration, but we will continue to grow as an economy, and we will be top four, three, four, five countries in the world. Now, if we reform ourselves, if we really get down to business, if we really invest sensibly in domestic capacities, we can do wonders. And I think, which means that the latent potential of India can be realized, and therefore the world looks at India today through a different lens. It looks at India through a lens of a country that is, of course, in some ways different from a country like China. We are a democracy. We may have our own problems, but no one can accuse us of not being a democracy. I mean, it's a Mr. Modi's critics may say, that he's this or that, but ultimately he's fighting elections every 5 years, and winning elections with huge mandates. So, in a sense, that acknowledgement of India as a transparent democracy also means that the expectations from India as a growing economy are much higher than, say, they are with China. With China, there is a lot of there are a lot of compromises you have to do, and you are. I think there is a broad consensus that China will largely dismantle the structure, because the existing structure, because it believes that it should create a new structure. But India has always given an indication that it wants to be a reformer in some ways. It wants to reform certain aspects of this multilateral system that we have created. It also wants to be a rule shaper rather than a rule taker. We want to shape global rules rather than constantly taking rules from made by others. And in that sense, our growing capacities help us. But the question is, uh, do we achieve that potential? Are we capable of achieving that potential? And in some ways, the real issue is domestic, that if we continue to work domestically in building our capacities, then I think we are in a we certainly can shape global outcomes, and we will continue to be one of the most important actors on the global stage, if not the most important. I think one of the most important is good enough. But ultimately, the journey is domestic. Can we transform ourselves domestically? Can we become can we ensure that we can take out so many people, we can take people below the poverty line, and take them above that. Can we change their fortunes? Can we change their future? And can we I think, can we also take advantage of the demographic dividend and the technological change that the world is going through? So some very difficult questions, but it is ultimately about India and India's policy making, and that is important. And I hope that um, youngsters like you will be making that contribution to India's global rise, as you come into policy making and as you think about what kind of public policy choices India should be making.
Thank you, sir. That was exaggeration, perhaps, but thank you for joining and your time and invaluable insights. This has been highly enlightening and thought-provoking session to me, and I'm sure it would be to the audience as well. So, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Piyush.